Makes sense. So really simple, narrow role then you've got.
Yeah, no,
So
it's tiny. Yeah. I always
cool.
joke like the day that everybody knows everything is the day that I'm out of a job.
That's good. I think you'll be around for a while then,
Job
barring
security.
retirement. Thanks.
This is
Welcome to the third episode of the East Peak podcast. On this show, we interview operators, individual contributors, and leaders that make the go-to-market world go round. On this particular episode, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Jim Rose, a longtime seller and sales enablement veteran. Welcome, Jim.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I was thinking back about this, but I actually met you 7 years and 2 days ago on December 5th, way back in 2000, or maybe 16 or 17. I need to double check, but you were overseeing my enablement first week boot camp at New Relic, and we got to talk about bikes, and here we are, 7 years later. So,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's my how time flies.
wow, cool. So, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the podcast today is I think that particularly in this environment where organizations are being asked to do much more with less, since money is not free anymore. I think that enablement in particular offers one of the highest leverage opportunities for organizations to operate with better rep productivity and better unit economics and really all of that good stuff. So today, would love to learn a little bit more about your journey and how you think about sales enablement in general. But for just a little bit of background, I think I noted that you had been selling for maybe at least 7 years before making the pivot. And since pivoting into sales enablement, you've helped lead really high performing enablement organizations at New Relic, Okta, and currently Thousand Eyes, part of Cisco. What else would you like to add to that background that might be helpful for the audience?
Yeah, no, good. That's kind of the net on it. I did about 8 or 9 years as kind of a project and program manager earlier in my career, and then transitioned into sales and did B2B SaaS software sales for several years across a few shops. I was at a startup that was acquired by CA, spent a few years at CA and then New Relic. And then transitioned into enablement during my tenure at New Relic, and have stayed kind of found my calling there. I realized this is really what I like to do, what I'm good at, what I'm drawn to. Get a lot of satisfaction from it. And so I at the time it was still pretty early on. Like enablement was just kind of becoming like a thing. I'm sure there's folks who've been doing it a lot longer who would disagree, but it seems like in the last 10 years or so, it's really kind of come into its own in terms of a practice and a role and a set of kind of an established way of doing things. So it's been a good run.
Very cool. I know at least at the time, Dave Walters, who's now at Okta, he believed firmly in taking really high performing sellers and putting them in support and operating roles in the business. I know, that's part of the reason that I was picked to lead and build out the SDR function there. What kind of drove that pivot for you? Was it something along those lines?
Yeah, it was actually. So I started looking for something else to do. I enjoyed sales. I think I was pretty good at it, but I've always been a bit more of an altruist. My original plan back at university was to get a PhD and teach, and then I realized I actually liked money and things, and so I decided to get a job and give that a try. But it's always been in my nature to be a helper, a facilitator, a supporter, a coach. And so when I was able to, take what I learned in sales and apply it to enablement, that seemed like a really good fit. I looked at a lot of other ways to, kind of directions to go. I thought about, continuing on in direct sales, going into sales leadership, customer success, even product roles. But, ultimately enablement seemed like a really good fit for kind of my native skill set and also really my personality profile.
Very cool. And I know it was a while ago now, and we can dive into this a little later, maybe like advice for those of whom that want to follow a similar path. But
Yeah.
What are some of the things that were maybe like non-obvious about the role in the space when you're pivoting over from a successful seller to an enablement role like that?
Not obvious about the enablement space, you mean?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. There wasn't the time, and there still really is no, kind of established way of doing things. I think we're all kind of making it up as we go along. And maybe the problems continue to just change and adapt and evolve, but there's certainly no real script you run. There's some standards and things that you fall back on, but it's at the time I really didn't know what I was getting into. I knew how to sell. I knew what our product did. So that was a really good, that sort of set me up well to transition into something new. I've had this conversation multiple times with folks along the way. I just was speaking to somebody a few weeks ago who's a seller looking to transition into enablement, and my advice was hey, like your value is how the company operates. You know how to sell and how they work and what the value is. There's a tremendous opportunity and value there to move within an organization if someone is thinking about transitioning into enablement. I think it's much harder if you're to try to do that, get a new role and move into a new company. Certainly much easier to do it when you've built up credibility, you've got experience in a particular organization and how they operate. That would be the sweet spot of someone looking to transition into an enablement role. Other folks in enablement tend to come at it more from like an enablement practice. They're instructional designers, they were project managers, program managers, and they come at enablement kind of from that angle. Certainly a super valid way to come at it, and that's a set of skills that if you don't have coming in, you'll certainly need to and have to learn quickly. And that's kind of what my journey was like, was knowing how to sell, but then having to learn how to build and roll out programs and capture requirements and deploy things that that sales leadership is needing and asking for, and then learning how to basically measure and track and report and all that fun stuff. So
Makes sense. So kind of zooming forward to your current role, like what is your specific like remit, and like what are your kind of like roles and responsibilities at Thousand Eyes?
Yeah, so Thousand Eyes part of Cisco. We are 1,000 or so people within Cisco, which is obviously a giant organization. We effectively function as like a sell-through motion. So we are it's kind of a best of both worlds. We function a little bit like an independent startup within but still having all of this like weight and might and power of Cisco behind us and to sell through. So my charter is really over all of go-to-market sales enablement. So from direct sellers to sales engineering, customer success, partner and channel, SDRs, et cetera. Essentially, the extended go-to-market team sort of falls under my remit to basically build and deploy training and enablement out to all of those individual users. So I really see it as like, how do you get the simple way to say it is how do you get folks connected to the thing that they need when they need it to help them do their job more effectively and efficiently? How do you get them from, day one to kind of ramped and job ready in the shortest amount of time possible? How do you, train and enable and educate people on all of the things that are happening in a fast moving organization in the course of a week? There's so much going on. So a big part of the role is really kind of curating the things and prioritizing the things and trying to deliver it in a way to sellers that it's sort of pre-vetted, and we try to do what we can to be a bit of a filtering function. So they're, basically they're able to spend more time selling and less time figuring out what they need to pay attention to as far as internal announcements and things of that nature.
Makes sense. So really, really simple, narrow role then you've got.
Yeah,
so.
no, it's tiny. Yeah. I always
Cool.
joke, like the day that everybody knows everything is the day that I'm out of a job.
That's good. I think you'll be around for a while then,
Job
barring
security.
retirement. Okay, cool.
That's right.
So, you and I have worked together at two companies now, and presumably at the other businesses you've been a part of in enablement too, might have like slightly different reporting structures for enablement. I've seen it bifurcated between kind of the sales side and then like general product marketing and things like that. Like, in your opinion, and maybe it varies a little bit by the kind of the product and the space and the technicality of the product, but what do you think is like your ideal state for, should you split up the team? Should it have one cohesive group, and who should that roll up to?
Yeah, I think the closer it is to sales, the better. I've reported in through sales operations. That can work, pros and cons. I've preferred when I've had or been in kind of a direct path to the CRO, and I think that's like the best home for enablement. If there's like, you need leadership alignment and buy-in to feel like they've got ownership, stakeholdership over the program, to drive people to the program. The further you get away from sales, I always sort of feel like it becomes more of almost like an HR function. Nothing, not to throw shade on our friends in HR, obviously, but it seems to have more wood behind the arrow when enablement is as closely aligned to sales as it can be. And ultimately you need that point of view and perspective. You need to be aligned to your sales leaders. You need to have a seat at the table. You need to be in QBRs, to find out what are the sellers contended with, what's going on, what's working, what's not, so that you're not getting that information 2 or 3 levels removed. I've worked in places where we were in different parts of the org, like in the marketing organization, for example, and I didn't think that was as good of a home for
Mm-hmm.
enablement to be. It is sales enablement. You've got to still think and act and talk and walk like the people that you're supporting, and your customer is sales. So the closer you're aligned you are to them, I think that just is a benefit to the organization.
Makes sense. So obviously, I think when it comes to actually performing, the sales org is obviously going to have the most skin in the game. So I think living
Yeah.
in that world probably makes the most sense. Like, I do like the idea of these teams rolling up to RevOps in concept, but I think one of the weaknesses I've seen is that, like, if you have a RevOps org that really is pretty empowered and strategic, that would probably be great.
Yeah.
But very often, what I've seen is that you might have the title of RevOps, but you're really much closer to the classical sales ops role, and you're running around doing a lot of tactical stuff. And so, again, you kind of get short shrift if you roll up to that kind of team.
I agree. It's pretty, enablement's pretty far outside of the charter, and I think core competency and skill set of what a really good ops team does. Like,
Mm-hmm.
as an example, our ops team here it's a huge team. It's probably 20-25 people, and they almost function. I mean, they basically function like a dev shop.
Mm.
They are building and releasing features. They're on sprints to basically get Salesforce integrations, dashboards, widgets, improvements, all level of process changes. So being the kind of wizards behind the curtain of the sales process we need to have alignment to them and great relationships with them, and that's always been something I've been very keen on. Like, being good at enablement or being able to be successful at it is really like knowing which of those heads of state to keep really close and be supportive of, because you're going to need a lot of help from product marketing, sales operations, and a bunch of other folks. But I think ultimately it's better when we're peers in terms of enablement and ops, because it is much more complementary. And I do think that we both need our own very different and direct access into sales leadership.
Makes sense. So a little earlier, you talked about kind of two most common pathways of coming into enablement. You talked about coming from selling and then maybe beefing up potentially in some like educational science type chops or
Yeah.
things like that, and then other people kind of coming from that world. How much do you think about integrating learnings from that world, or maybe even concepts like spaced repetition or others? Like, is that something that you spend a lot of time thinking on, or is it more just kind of like, let's get to it kind of thing?
If I had more time, I would. And it's one of those things I probably always should do more of.
Hmm.
I think about it in terms of trying to always, one thing I'm always doing is like shopping for, trying to keep my finger on, new technologies that are hitting the market. I'm fortunate that I get, once or twice a quarter, I'll get pinged from someone who's starting a startup, has a neat idea, and kind of wants to run a product, a new product idea by me. In terms of the project management, I think there's we could always probably be better project managers. If I had my druthers, I'd probably hire somebody who was really good at that as a
Hmm.
specific function. I think for the most part, I've just built up enough skill over the last whatever it is now, 8, 8, 9, 10 years of doing it, that I know what it takes to get products up and off the ground, projects up and off the ground. And that really changes in organizations. And, it's one of the things I'm learning here. I'm, being pushed pretty far outside of my skill set and comfort zone. Because as you can imagine, Cisco has a level of, project management rigor that is as good as it gets. And so, projects actually have dedicated professional project managers who have been doing this for decades. So that's very different from, a couple of roles I've had where, you're in a fast moving startup and everyone's doing 12 jobs. So it's the focus isn't on making it perfect or making it pretty. The focus is on just getting it done as soon as you can.
Hmm.
So it's nice to have an opportunity to kind of like learn more, flex those muscles, develop those different skills, and kind of up level my own game around some of the project management functions, because it is really critical to getting things off the ground and delivered well.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the answer to this next question is probably a little bit like company stage dependent, but there's probably some universalities behind it too. But what do you think is like on average, like the biggest bottleneck for to get sales teams performing well when it comes to enablement?
It's time and attention, really. It just comes down to time and attention. The catch 22 is how do you train people adequately to get them to do their job beyond a shadow of a doubt. Realistically, I need to put you in training for 8 hours, 40 hours a week for 20 weeks to really be able to definitively say that you can do all the things, all the things, you can prospect, discover, qualify, you can do all the things in Salesforce, to really be able to do your job at 100% proficiency. And even that's a bit of a stretch. So it really comes down to you don't get that much time. You don't, attention spans aren't getting any longer. People aren't getting less distracted. So how do you build sort of the minimum viable
Hmm.
to, I think be realistic with what people can do in terms of time. I have reps that start, and they need to be, basically doing things on day one. So it isn't like we have all of the luxury of time to really effectively and adequately train people. So it becomes a game of how do you do the minimum viable with the time that you have and the attention that you have to make the biggest impact for people.
Mm.
And I think that's the thing I think about most, the thing that we're challenged with the most. And I hear that from a lot of my peers in enablement is just constantly trying to think of ways to sort of meet reps where they are, to be really mindful of how much have going on, how busy they are. They're up. It's the hardest job in the world. They're up against a number. They're being asked to do so many things and pulled in so many different directions. So, I think it's important to be very cognizant of that and empathetic to it, really. Like,
Hmm.
that any minute you're taking away or asking for a seller's attention span is a very expensive minute. And so we take those minutes really seriously and try to be as effective and efficient and impactful as we can with them.
Makes sense. So let's see here. Yeah, I mean, in response to that, I mean, we definitely live in a world of trade-offs, and I could see, you don't aren't necessarily making like a satisfying versus maximizing trade-off, but just like what has the highest leverage,
Yeah.
for sure. I think one of the biggest changes I've seen since a lot of us have gone remote or at least like hybrid since COVID is like the vector or the medium by which we get a lot of the enablement.
Hmm.
I think like the social pressure of needing to pay attention in person loses some of its grasp when you're going through like an LMS module. Like,
Yeah.
how do you think about that? And like, how does that affect kind of compliance in your perspective?
Yeah, it's funny that we're all kind of it's weird that I did live in person 30, 40, 50, 60 people a month for years across a couple different shops, people coming from all over the world. And you think now of like what that would, the time and the money to do that. It's crazy to think we ever did that, but it also it made for a really good experience. And folks learned you can just do a lot more. You can go deeper and faster when you've got people in a room. You can kind of control their attention spans in a way that you just can't, in the virtual world. In an ideal world, it's a bit of, you use a bit of both.
Hmm.
You cost and time permitting, you would You'd have some really strategic time where teams are getting together and you can do live in-person training. Because again, you really can go like you can cover a lot of ground, you can move fast, you can go deep, and you can really tell, kind of what the engagement is and what people are getting out of it. And people also get a lot, you see them get a lot out of that. And not just what they learn, but the camaraderie, the culture that comes from that, and those, are easy things to kind of overstate. It's really valuable from a culture perspective when teams get together and have that that together time. But there's an efficiency that you can't ignore about the remote world, and being able to bring people in from all over the world into a remote call and do what you can in Zoom and also through e-learning. I think there's certain kinds of content that lends itself to the different modes. Like
Hmm.
tools training, in my opinion, is really great for like e-learning content. A lot of the kind of the base calisthenics or exercises you would do are great for e-learning content. But in order to really like bring it together, messaging, for example, objection handling, competitive positioning, those are kinds of things you really have to see and hear people fumble through it and figure it out. And that gives us a sense like, are they picking up the material? Are they getting it? Can they do the thing or not? And so you need to have both. And I think it's like, the e-learning stuff and the remote stuff is kind of like eating your vegetables. It's necessary and it's efficient and effective, but you got to intersperse that with a little bit of live where you can. We're slowly moving back towards that, which is great.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of the in-person kind of boot camp type week if your company can afford that,
Yeah.
or if it's mostly in person or hub based. Because one, I think like yes, it's important to like learn the products, but I think there's like a lot of other like meta benefits where it's like you're getting buy-in about the culture, you're jibing, you're
Yeah.
hopefully you're meeting people in other organizations that you wouldn't run into, the bonds. Like I think it's at the front end, like it's definitely really helpful. And then like when you can, I think like layering stuff around QBRs or like a big H2 event or something is a nice compromise, I think too. But
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Those are all great opportunities to, piggyback on. QBRs is a good one. Kickoff events are great ones, but anything you can do to help to bring people together and just have people in a physical room together it's a huge benefit to culture and to content. People just get a lot more out of it. So
maybe most importantly, when you've got them in person, you can tell if your jokes are actually landing or not.
that's exactly right. Yeah, my jokes never land, so I'm used to flopping in the live and virtual worlds.
That Venn diagram is a circle. Okay.
That's right.
So, how do you think about, you mentioned a little earlier, like metrics and accountability? Like, how do you think about measuring success? Like, what is your mental framework for that? And maybe what is the tactical implications?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good segue because I was just thinking, the hard thing about the live stuff and obviously the cost implication to, hey, I want to fly 40 people from around the world, for a week, a month. The cost impact is massive. So how would you ever justify that? If I'm a a CFO looking at that, it's a tough pill to swallow. And it's a hard thing to metricize. You're selling on really soft metrics for a program like that. So you have to have
Hmm.
leaders that really buy in on it and believe in it and push for it. Because I don't think you'd ever really be able to defend it really with numbers. But so the question about metrization is it's a hard thing to do in enablement. Everybody asks this, and it's one of these things that comes up in job interviews, all the time. But um, I really don't think, or I think it would be very, very difficult to, draw and be able to make causal links between what you train folks on and what they can or can't do. And again, you could do it, but it would require putting people through training, content and material that would be so time intensive. No one, it wouldn't be palatable. No one
Mm.
would be able to justify the time and energy and attention asked to have a rep in a classroom for X number of weeks full time
Hmm.
to really be able to zero in on that, right? Like we, kind of connect folks to content, spoon feed them, give them the sort of kickstart, and really require them to go continue their learning journey to get, kind of to bridge the gap and finish the rest of the way. So what we do is we try to make kind of, to correlate like, hey, we,
Hmm.
we put this amount of time in these kinds of efforts. And that helps, we think as a result of that, we had an impact of these metrics. And I think done well, that can be a powerful way to provide some like leading indicators to sales leadership on, you know, are people doing the things? Are they showing up? Are they grasping the core concepts? Do we have any folks that maybe that aren't, and we have opportunities there to kind of step in and see what else is going on and help remediate against? But and then when you go through time, it's a good way to keep, again, kind of a different set of metrics and a finger on the pulse of like, what is the engagement and the competency of the sales team? Are they showing up? Are they consuming things? Is your content good? Are you providing good content? And we spend a lot of attention and energy really looking at the content that we provide to make sure that we're just delivering good content to our customers. But so it's a little bit of push and pull. Like, the content has to be good. You got to build good things so they come, but also we need, leadership to prioritize it and to help drive from their end and drive folks to engage with it. But, getting back to your question, I think ultimately we look for ways to correlate activities that enablement does and then outcomes that we help support. And I think that it would be very hard to make like kind of causal links. There are certain ways and places you can do that. You run a pitch certification, for example, you can causally define that, X percentage of your sales team can pitch within a certain range of competence. But it's much higher calorie. So we are pretty sparing about when and where we deploy that level of rigor.
Some of the companies I'm advising and working with, we've been talking about doing like incrementality analysis when it comes to like pipeline contribution, just because like first touch, last touch, multi-touch, it's all pretty poor. It doesn't tell you much. Right. But really in order to do that, you need to make some cohorts. And I think politically you can get buy-in to do that with targeting with demand gen campaigns or SDR support. I think you can get buy-in, but I think you would probably struggle to get political buy-in. But in my mind, at least you could create a control group where if you have enough throughput for new sellers, okay, they don't do the in-person event. They do the in-person event, control versus the test group. And then like maybe online modules and stuff. But the heat that you probably feel is really similar to the SDR organizations I've led in the past, which is, you are subject to very discrete, firm opinions from leadership on exactly what they would want to see from you. And I think it would be pretty hard probably to get that kind of buy-in.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And everybody's got a really strong opinion about how to do it, what to do, how it should be run, what to test on. So getting that alignment is honestly one of the big challenges of, I always say enablement isn't that hard. It's getting people to agree on, what we should enable on is kind of the hard thing. It's certainly one of the more difficult parts of the job is because, a lot of smart folks that have been doing it for a long time with different backgrounds and have, just different opinions and takes on, what good looks like or how to get from A to B. But there's certainly good ways to do it. SDRs are great too, because it's higher volume and maybe a bit like reduced in terms of what they need to know. The scope's a little narrower. So I've always used them as a really good test bed for, processes, content, whatever it is, because you can kind of see it change in real time. The fruit flies of the sales world.
Makes sense. Well, I think unfortunately, there's like a lot in common, just to dip our toes in a slightly spicier water. But one of the things that's been interesting to navigate in my career in terms of managing like large inside sales and SDR teams is there's like a pretty discrete prestige kind of pecking order. You might be one of the best commercial sales leaders in the world, and you might manage a giant organization that does the majority of the revenue throughput for the business, but you'll still get some side eye from enterprise sellers or enterprise leaders. And I think pretty close to the bottom of that pecking order are both SDRs and the people that lead them. And for better or for worse, enablement sometimes gets bundled down there too. How do you kind of deal with that? Or, how do you think about that problem in terms of getting buy-in and from those people that it might be a pretty big gap between prestige and buy-in?
Yeah, the prestige thing, it's I always joke we're kind of the last ones to get credit and the first ones to get blame. That's just part of the job. And it's fun, it's all good. what really, kind of rings my bell is when, when you run a course, and somebody reaches out to you, a seller reaches out to you in Slack or chat or whatever, and just says, hey, thanks. This was really incredible. Great job. This was the best training that I've had, super supported. That's the stuff that really, for me is kind of where the rubber hits the road. Like
Hmm.
if you're making, if you're getting that feedback from your, ultimately your end user customer, the challenge is then how do you show that back to the business and show your value through a set of subjective and objective ways and means to demonstrate the value of what you're doing, and not just make it look like a bunch of activity, but also try to correlate it to out business outcomes. um, so so I the other part of it is I think like anything, it's good customer service. It's staying in step with your customers, knowing who your customers are, and solving problems for them. And if you solve problems for them, they see you there, doing what they think are the valuable things. That's kind of how I've overcome the also the political angle or political issue, but
Hmm.
you got to earn your keep and earn your credibility. But I think it takes time. But once you do that, I think you kind of earn a seat at the table, and you'll see that in what folks ask you to do and expect from your organization.
Makes sense. So
Yeah.
to that end, in terms of like earning a seat at the table and being involved, like do you find, we're kind of in the middle of annual planning season for a lot of businesses. Do you find that you get pulled into those conversations very frequently, or it's a little more on the receiving end after it's baked in?
A little bit of both. I'm always trying to keep my radar up and stay stay as ahead of those conversations as I can, and insert myself anywhere and everywhere I can. But you're also going to be on the back end of a lot of things, and a lot of requirements and decisions that are made that you're not privy to. So and I think that also comes down to good, again, where you sit in the business, and having a leader who really gets it, gets enablement, understands what you do, what you need, the impact you have, the challenges that you have, and having leaders who can, when you're not in the room, can basically be good champions to those kinds of things, help you see around certain corners, and anticipate what's coming. Um, and so yeah, I think again, it's a little bit of both. We're never probably in all the conversations we'd like to be in, just especially in bigger organizations.
Hmm.
But you've got to educate and align with the folks who will be at those tables, so that they can basically be your eyes and ears, and mouthpiece when needed.
Okay, great. Cool. So, well, one more kind of like specific question, and then we'll close out a little bit about like how should someone think about trying to pursue a career and enablement and stuff like that. But um, something I've found that's it's a problem that's more common than not is kind of this like telephone effect,
Hmm.
particularly if you have a pretty technical product. So, like when I was at Glassdoor, not a super technical product, not a lot lost in translation. New Relic, security tools, like where you're at today, that definitely is a, a distinct possibility. Um, because pretty much what's happening in my observation is you've got a product manager that's maybe working with a product marketer. That product marketer is summarizing the information. Then they're kind of educating you. Then you and your team are kind of bundling that up and making it palpable for sales. And somewhere along the way, the territory no longer matches the map. Um, the mental model that the seller has maybe coming out of that, if it's not informed by very uh, eye-opening conversations with the people they're selling to, letting them know they're kind of missing the mark.
Yeah.
You can kind of be pretty far off. So, how do you think about um, minimizing that loss through the process, and maybe making sure that you're creating like good feedback loops so that that doesn't happen as much?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in my career, and actually one of the things I really enjoy about the job is helping product marketing, product teams really, help them sell the thing into sales is all how I've always looked at it, and oftentimes, You see it, you see a new feature, function, whatever it is, it's positioned as like, here's all the cool things it does, but really nothing about like, well, what's the market context? Like why did we build this? What market problem does it solve? Are we trying to get competitive parity? Are we trying to like leapfrog the competition in the market? Is it a table stakes thing? Is it something we built one off for like our top customer or whatever? And then from there, it's like, well, what's my pitch? What's the value add? What's the person I'm talking to about it on the phone going to say? Well, yeah, but we already do this, that, and the other thing, and don't really need it. Like, what objections I'm going to run into? And it's just thinking through, like, how do I actually, sell that? How do you discover, qualify,
Mm.
prospect, objection handle, blah, blah, blah. What impacts are there to, how do you trial it? How do you get it in their hands? How do you price it? So so when I start asking those questions, uh, it's really fun to see product marketers go, oh yeah, right, yeah, let's double down on that. So, here for example, I've done some templates for folks so they can, to basically kind of step through what's the 10 slide Monty for how a salesperson would want to see this new product update delivered in a much more kind of like sales facing way, or in a sales lens. What you find is it's a lot less like about what the thing does,
Hmm.
kind of give me the 3 bullets, but what are how do I sell it? Why would I buy it? What's it cost? Do we have customers using it today? What are the business outcomes that it can achieve? And there's often a lot of story and a lot of really cool stuff you can help kind of tease out about that feature, or whatever it is that's getting deployed. So that's a super fun part of the job for me.
Very
Um,
cool. So
yeah.
you're definitely kind of adding value both ways there. It's not just refining the message. You're like back informing or maybe helping these product marketers and whomever see around corners as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and I always ask for things like, hey, let's prescribe as an idiot proof as much as we can. Like give what are give me 5 good qualification questions. Give me a couple of good customer sound bites that came out of beta testing. Let's really put kind of um, things in the hands of sales that are much more tactical and actionable that they can actually just capitalize on and use. I always think about training on theory is one thing, but any training that you do, a seller should come out of that training and have at least a few new like tricks, tips, skills, tidbits, sound bites, whatever that they can put into practice right away to hopefully start making a difference in what they're doing.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. So as we approach close here, what kind of advice would you give people that are enablement curious that are interested in pursuing a similar path?
Yeah, I always, like I said earlier, it's funny. I just had this conversation with someone who reached out just a couple weeks ago, which I love. But my advice was it's really tough to make multiple changes at once, right? If you're a seller in a shop and you want to go into enablement, the path of least resistance for you is to play the cards you have, and go volunteer, tap on those folks. Like we
Mm.
are always looking for help, basically, and subject matter experts to deliver a new hire training class, to help bang on some new content, to revise old content. There's a million ways that your enablement team can kind of use you if you're a seller in somewhere, and you've got a huge amount of value in what you do, and knowing how to talk about and sell and position is, and the longer you've lived that life and the further and deeper you've been in the trench, the more valuable that experience is. So go tap on their shoulders, and it's one of those things. It's kind of how I did it, was kind of raising my hand and helping, and that eventually turned into a job offer for me. So I think that's the best way to do it. Obviously, work your network. If you're a great seller somewhere, maybe you have an old colleague that's gone on to a different role, is looking for help, and that maybe is one way you could move over and into a new shop. But I think the common path is for folks, sellers especially, moving into enablement, to try to like move within the current organization that they're in.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like
The other thing I'll say too is, don't do it too early. I've often get calls from, you know, SDRs who've been in the role for, for a year or two, for maybe junior sellers who've been in the role for a couple of years. Be cautious on not selling yourself short. You've done a lot of hard work, especially if you're, if you're a commercial seller somewhere, and maybe you did some time as an SDR. Like that's the hardest part of sales. You've cut your teeth. So like go
Hmm.
capitalize on that for a while. You have a lot more to learn. Spend some more time, make some more money, develop your skills. Maybe lead a team. From there, if you do want to go into enablement, you have a very, very different value proposition than
Hmm.
if you've only got a couple of years of sales, let's say. So don't move too quickly or sell yourself short.
Yeah, I've seen something similar with like SDR leadership where, you know, a typical path that some of these organizations can follow is you go SDR team lead, then you become an SDR manager.
Yeah,
And instead of going over and closing, maybe get up to at least commercial sales or greater and coming
yeah,
back. And the on target earnings difference between those two, essentially arriving in the same place, are very different.
yeah.
And the former can kind of put you in a career cul-de-sac because then you have to convince people that you can carry a bag in a way that you were like next in line to carry one earlier.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The career cul-de-sac. I like that. But no, it's part of that is just being a good steward of your own career and kind of where you are and what you've done and what do the next steps look like for you in a sales role and where do you want to ultimately get to. You'll never go wrong having more full cycle sales experience. Like
Hmm.
you'll always be able to get a job, and there's a number of different avenues you can take once you develop a solid skill set in that arena.
Love it. Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. Jim, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or perhaps learn more about your current employer, what's the best way they could reach you?
Yeah, please. LinkedIn's great. It's just Jim Rose. Email is thejimrose at Gmail. But yeah, always happy to connect and chat and share what little I've learned along the way.
Love it. Well, thanks for your time, Jim. I had a blast, and thanks again for your time.
You bet, man. Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.